Hey, it's Russ from Pilates Guy, and today I'm talking to you about the anterior pelvic tilt, which might be a phrase you've heard thrown around a little bit in the past. So I'll tell you what it is, then I'll tell you why it happens, and then I'll give you a couple of things that you can do to try and help it, try and ease it or try and correct it even. So let's talk about posture first of all. Most of the time when we think about poor posture, we think about that emoji they used to have, which is just like that rounded shoulders, head forward, really rounded. That's poor posture. That's what a lot of we just assume is poor posture. But one of the worst postural issues you can get is issues around the pelvis, a constantly tilted pelvis, and that's what anterior pelvic tilt is. So basically, anterior is the front and posterior is the back. So an anterior pelvic tilt means that you are tilting from the top of the pelvis with your tailbone sticking out a little bit and a deep arch in your lower back. It's lordosis posturally. But all that really is anterior pelvic tilt. All that means is that your pelvis is tilting anteriorly. And you can move your pelvis through all of those ranges of motion as in a lot of my other videos. But basically this happens. So that's what it is. It is an anterior pelvic tilt. And as you can imagine, this has an impact on the rest of the body. So it can cause pain in the neck, even the shoulders. It can cause pain in the ankles and the knees. It can cause issues and dysfunction with the muscles all over the body. The reason most of us get this is because we sit down a lot. Even if you're reasonably active or very active, even if you're really super active, you can still get this if a lot of the time you end up sat down, whether that's driving, whether it's at a desk in meetings, or just in your leisure time when you're not training really hard, you like playing games or watching films or something like that. You could be really susceptible to this, just long periods of sitting down. So even if you are fit, healthy, and active, you're still at risk of this. And actually, if you are fit, healthy, and active, you're very likely to get more random recurring strains, like hamstring strains, calf pulls, and things like that. They happen a lot more regularly for people, sports people who have seated jobs. So you sat down, whether it's sales or professional jobs and that sort of thing, or driving even. So you can find that that's much more common. The hamstring pulls getting sniped when you're running and sprinting and things like that, much more common because of this. And it can be corrected as well. So I will talk to you about how that can be corrected. It can also happen with people that stand up quite a lot. So even if you've got a job where you stand up quite a lot, because if you are in quite a physical job, you'll probably recover by sitting down for long periods in your free time when you're tired, which is going to cause the same problem. Also, sometimes when we're stood up a lot, if we're not necessarily moving around all the time, or if we are lifting and things, we can do things with that tilt and it just gets reinforced. So it can happen in physical jobs as well, but the main culprit is sitting down. The reason sitting down is the main culprit is because we tend to have the legs, the hips flexed like this with both legs, of course, when we're sat down. And the hip flexors get really short and tight because we're in this position. So your body's amazing. It adapts to whatever you do with it. And so whatever your positions you put it in most regularly is what it will adapt to. And if that's sitting down, your body will adapt and be really good at sitting down. So these hip flexors when we're sat down get really tight, and they will actually pull your pelvis out of alignment because we're sat on our glutes all the time and there's a dysfunction there. The glutes don't fire as well, they're not as strong, they don't work as well as they should, meaning a lot more pressure goes down the legs into the hamstrings and things like that. So this is, if you're not even active, this can cause you back pain, this can cause you all the pain that I'm talking about. But if you are active, then it's going to cause you those pain issues and a lot of other problems. And you could ignore it if you're not having any problems at the moment, but ultimately it's likely to cause you problems down the line. So the things that you can do about it, the one most important thing you can do if you sit down a lot is to not sit down so much. So you might think, if I'm in a sat down job, how am I going to do that? But sit stand desks are a great idea if you're working from home at the moment, like a lot of people are. Set something up, like just throw something together, table on a table or whatever it is, and get yourself a separate keyboard and mouse from your computer and your laptop so you can set yourself up comfortably to work standing. But don't stand up for too long because static standing is just as bad. But it is variety, it's about moving around. So if you sit down a lot, that's the first most important thing you can do. Obviously, I would say actually the best thing you can do is do Pilates because it's the most closely related to posture. The exercise methodology is most closely related to posture, core strength, and balancing the body and the pelvis and things like that. So do Pilates, that would be my advice. But there's a lot of things you can take from that. So just being aware of posture, postural movements like pelvic tilts, which is one of the videos that I will, which will pop up on screen in a second. And the other video that I've created for you is the working from home or working from an office 25-minute Pilates session, which includes loads of exercises that are really good for correcting posture. So that will also pop up as well as the pelvic tilts. The other thing that you really need to do every single day, if you're sat down a lot, is stretch your hip flexors. So do that if you're standing up as well. If you do think you're getting a bit of an anterior pelvic tilt, that deep arch, that tailbone sticking out, those hip bones at the top just slowly starting to tilt the other way, stretch hip flexors. If you're, say, sat down for 10 hours a day, which is quite possible, you want to spend 20 minutes stretching your hip flexors through various different movements and different hip flexor stretches. So that's probably one of the most important things you can do as well, would be to stretch those hip flexors. The other thing you should really focus on doing is strengthening your glutes and getting them firing properly. So that's things like glute bridges, shoulder bridges, all of which, with a lot of these exercises, you will find them on my YouTube channel or in that working from home exercise session that I've provided, which will be plugged there. So you'll find those exercises will make a big difference towards it. But just being aware, doing your pelvic tilts, finding your neutral spine, which I talk about in another video on my YouTube channel. Neutral spine is that optimum position for the spine. It causes less wear and tear on all the supporting joints and tissues and discs of the spine. So if you're not in neutral, you're putting more pressure on the spine. So if you do have anterior pelvic tilt, you'll be putting much more wear and tear on those lower back discs and all the supporting tissues. So it can cause a lot of pain. So even if it isn't now, it can do in the future. So just be aware of it. Just try and think of what neutral spine is. Try and maintain neutral spine wherever you can. Get those cores nice and strong. Get those glutes firing, those hip flexors stretched, and hopefully it'll take you a few steps towards correcting anterior pelvic tilt. If you're not sure if you have or haven't, or if you know you have, but you wanted to go a little bit further into this, please get in touch with me. I'll be happy to speak to you about it. If you've got any questions, fire them over. Thank you very much for watching the video. I do hope it's helpful, and I'll speak to you again soon.